right, man. We're pretty fired up. We ready to change the world here?
We are ready. It's December 29th, 2022. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 646.
Yes, it is, and we are coming into a new year.
That's the rumor. Coming into a new year, new us. And we are going to be changing everything. We're giving up sugar. We're giving up dairy. We are going to recycle everything we have. We're going to give up air. We're going to give up water. We are going to both drop 85 pounds in the first week. We're going to crush it.
Yep.
No, this will not be a
podcast 5 days a week.
Cast.
5 days a week
right,
podcast.
Exactly.
Be ready.
Yeah,
Get your AirPods ready because we're coming at you hard.
5 podcasts a week. That sounds, but that's it. Everybody's gonna be ramped up and amped up to start the new year, making a lot of big changes and getting excited. Hope everyone again had a wonderful Christmas, like we said earlier this week, and have a great and safe start to the new year. It's your first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe, and just podcasts in general. Time is very valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as coaches and athletes, but as human beings ourselves living on this planet. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I both work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level triathletes looking at their very first 5K or even sprint, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to the world championships, and everyone in between from all over the world. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them in Training Peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion today. We also utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group, answer one simple question, we'll let you right in. Awesome resource, amazing community, fantastic people. And again, it's a wide range of people and experiences and athletes that have done it all, been around the block, raced it all, made all the mistakes, had a lot of success. So if you're one of those people who has a lot of questions or is not really sure where to turn to, and there's too much information out there, because there is, tune in and ask questions, because you'll get a lot of great feedback and a lot of really, honestly, solid, thought out, applicable answers, and with not a lot of fluff attached to it. So utilize that group. Don't be a lurker, but participate. It's a great community, and it's awesome to be a part of that. We'll go in there at least once a month and do a Q&A, answer the questions from the people, and do our best to get through those as we can. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We don't do ads. And really, we don't do interviews either. But we do have an agenda, and that's to do our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
You know, I have to say, there is something a little compelling about new beginnings and the idea of having a new year. And we talked about a lot on Tuesday, actually, about how, you know, the thing is, when you make a change, it's a lot easier to kind of prime yourself for a change, like we were talking about. And I'm sure a lot of people are out there, and me included. I mean, like, you know, it does spin. I don't know. We always talk about the fictitious, weird nature of just creating a new year, you know, like when it's really just like another day in the scope of things. But I don't know. I think it does kind of give somebody, I mean, there has to be success stories, right? New year, new beginnings. And we're talking about a little bit today, but, you know, like, it's a good time to really go back to our grassroots and sort of, you know, help the sport grow and stuff like that, and help ourselves grow. And I know you have some thoughts on this, but I just was thinking about how it is kind of interesting to think, like, okay, you wake up, it's New Year, what do you got? Because the calendar's a little cleared, you know. That I think that's probably the best part, at least for me. You know, you got the holidays out of the way, you can kind of get a little more focused and see if you can keep it going. And I have some things I want to do this year. I'm sure you do. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's, again, like, this isn't going to be a you know, what Mike and I's resolutions are going to be for this year, or a review of our 2022 best podcast. But no, I agree. Like, and I'm right there with you. Like, I'm not a big resolution guy. Like, I do have things I want to improve on, but I think most athletes in general, we're always trying to improve, right, and get better and do better and maybe do things differently or be more specific in certain areas. And I do. The end of a year, I think, is relieving, right, for a lot of people, because it creates optimism, right? Not solely because it's a new year, but I think for many people, because the majority of people on this planet overcommit, right? Make ridiculous goals that really care about and that are really meaningful to them and have no way to reach, reach their goals. You are as far away from possible as you are from your failures, right? And your inability to stick with a goal, right? And you're a lot closer to, the rebirth, right? Or a new beginning or a new year. So that's why I think people get so excited, because you're as far away from possible from this past January 1st, where you made all these goals or you made all these things you want to do, and you're going to be different. Things are going to change, and I want to improve on this. And then, life happens, right? And the goals you set probably weren't realistic, or months went by and they just didn't become as meaningful, anymore. And so you just kind of let them slide. You didn't create new goals. Like, I'll just wait. So I think that's why there's this huge sense of optimism, which is great. I think optimism is awesome, right? It usually spurs new thoughts, and new inspirations from things. But the biggest piece of that is action, right? And I think, and that's the message that I hope that we get across today is things that you can do to put into action to not just improve yourself, but to improve this sport. And yeah, I was running around this morning. I did a 30-minute easy run, and I'm not going to go on my rants about Nashville, but it always bugs me when I'm hearing people like, "Oh, so where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from here." Like, I remember when there was a Carmike 6 where Chick-fil-A was in Brentwood. I remember where there was, all these things. Like, I'm from here. And so you run around and, and one of the big things for people to do these days is change their Facebook profile, change their background, put a sign in their yard for what they stand for and what they believe in. But the difference is that that's not action. That should just tell people where your actions come from and what your beliefs are. But simple things like that aren't action, right? Even our podcast, to an extent, isn't action, right? It's you and I on a podcast talking about our experiences, trying to help people in the sport, but it's not technically an action, right? And actions speak louder than words. And one of the biggest pieces or one of the biggest parts of this coming year that I hope we can impact directly, right, and indirectly through the message we have today and things we can do, is to how to grow this sport. And listen, triathlon is oftentimes billed as a selfish sport, right? And it is, right? It is to an extent. It is not a team, right? For the most, for argument's sake, it's not a team sport. It's very individualistic. Most people train alone. Heck, people don't even train in groups anymore. They train online with virtual buddies, or they train in their basement alone, and their spouse doesn't care, their family doesn't care what they do, how they do it. It's a very selfish sport. And then you think about how we got here, right? You and I talked about this earlier this week when there was I think a Triathlete magazine article reviewing $18,000 bikes, $4,000 wheel sets. And then you're like, and you wonder why the sport isn't growing.
Right.
Right. And honestly, that comes back to us a lot too. You and I talk a lot about, a 70.3 distance Ironman, just because that's usually, you can give your best experiences from things that you're going through in the thick of it, right? And that's traditionally what you and I have trained for the past few years, although we work with a ton of athletes that do 5Ks, 10Ks, sprints, Olympics, and then that's their jam. That's when they get better, and then that's awesome. But I do think we are in a very unique time in our sport where, we touched on the move of the Ironman World Championships a few weeks ago, and then also like how little that affects the sport in general, but how the sport has become so focused on the longest distance, right? The Ironman, even Ironman to a degree, in my opinion, has ruined the sport in a way to where you make things under the guise of a premise of safety, right? We're doing away with mass starts. We're going to make things more safe. It's like you want everyone to jump from 5K to full, right? And that's not safe either. Mm-hmm. And I think what gets lost in is the feeling and the process and you can't fall in love with a sport in 8 months. I don't think. I think it takes time, and I think there has to be a focus honestly, in the rebirth of this sport, going back to its roots, which was, when I got started, which was, quite a bit of time before you did, but the very, very, very first time I ever trained for a race, I was working in a restaurant. I was 22 years old. I was trying to lose weight. I was 60 pounds overweight. I was just coming off like this. I was 22. I had just moved. I had to just move back, and honestly, to my parents' house because I was suicidal. I was just not in a good place. I was overweight, was depressed, and then I met this guy who I knew from growing up who had just actually done Kona, and he was like, the sport will change your life if you wanted to, and so I started to train using this 12-week plan out of Triathlete magazine. Had no money, had nothing. Was overweight, was out of shape, and I've shared the story of like going to the Conqueror YMCA, 60 pounds, whatever it was, overweight with my navy blue cargo shorts on. I made it a 50 and left. But I worked at a restaurant. On my break from working doubles, I would drive 3 miles down the street to the YMCA in Cool Springs, and I would hop on a spin bike because I couldn't afford a bike. And I'd hop on there for 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time, really just trying to. And then I'd go run on the treadmill. I didn't have enough to own a bike. And then I worked up to where, I got decently in shape. Then I ended up moving to Hilton Head. Still couldn't afford a bike, but was still training, right? Because all I wanted to do was complete one. I wanted to get my body in shape. And I was living in Hilton Head, and I had gotten to where I was in really good shape. Like I was working for the Ocean Rescue Squad there, and I was swimming great, and I was in probably arguably some of the best shape of my life. Still couldn't afford a bike. I was saving up for this S22 felt. It was red that I bought from Go Try Sports in Hilton Head Island, which is Go Try Sports is now, I think, a pretty big. They've got multiple stores, and all I wanted to do was participate in this race called the Beach Swim Triathlon, where the swim was ocean swim, and then you rode your bike on the beach, and then you ran. That was the first race I did, and I couldn't have cared less how I finished. I could barely clip in, right? I got clip-ins, I got clips pedals, and then I'm like was weaving around in the sand on my brand new S22 felt I bought for $1,200, and the skinny little tires was definitely not made for sand, and finished the race. And I fell in love with the sport during that period of time because I loved what it did for me. I didn't care about the fact that my bike, didn't have race wheels. I didn't care that I was, I had to save. And I'm not kidding you. I bought the bike like a week before the race because that's how long it took me to save up for it. And you look at the sport now and you look how local race management companies have been dwarfed and put out of business. Obviously 2020 and 2021 didn't do them any favors, but that no one wants to do them anymore, right? It's all about how big and how bold we can go. We got to do our Ironman with the first year. You and I get inquiries all the time about, athletes, I just learned how to swim and I think I want to do a full this year. And I'm like, I don't honestly know that I can condone that, just from a safety standpoint. Like swimming is very serious, but that's what we do. We've bypassed the root of the sport, which was the piece that's the most accessible, right? And when I say most accessible, it's the cheapest, right? The sprints and Olympics are the cheapest distance to do. Always. They always will be. 70.3s and Ironman distance are so expensive to do. Then you think about the travel to go. You think about the hotel. You think about the flights. You think about shipping your bike. Then you think about what the bikes cost to do it. And we priced ourselves out of this opportunity and this inclusiveness where triathlon is and has continued to be shrinking into more of an exclusive sport, right? Which is the opposite of what it should be. The mission of the sport, the mission of what, we do as a podcast should be to reach as many people as possible, right? No matter how, no matter your shape, no matter your size, no matter how old you are, it should just be to get you in, right? And that's something I know that we are very passionate about and want to do a better job of focusing on and implementing this next year. But we have to do better, right? As a sport, I know you and I as a podcast, but as triathletes ourselves, right, is to do what we can to help other people, because as a society, we've gotten so focused on what can we do for ourselves. It's all about me. Oh my gosh, this is terrible for me. This is terrible for me. And this is like one of the biggest issues I have with, and why I don't ever talk about politics is everyone's focused on what you can do for me instead of, what I believe it should be, which is, what's best for my neighbors is also what's best for me. And that's how it should be with us as triathletes, right? Is what's going to grow the sport? Is it just doing Ironman? No, it's getting people to fall in love with every aspect of the sport. And you look at running, just think if running, limited 5Ks and 10Ks, right? It was only half marathons and marathons. it would shrink and die.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not. It's 5Ks. It's 1 miles. It's family fun runs. It's Christmas morning runs. It's turkey trots. It's July 4th. It's anything and everything and every opportunity for anyone to go out. You can walk the whole thing. You can run. You can run with your kid, and that's why it's growing. Right. And yeah, I think all sports to an extent are shrinking a little bit right now, just because of the fact that people are still like not going outside for and doing things or spending money. But there is a way, right? And there is a way for us to kind of go back to the grassroots of this sport, which was, back in the day, I'm going to shut up in a minute, I swear. Like there were Olympics that were like where professionals would come to. There was a race series in Des Moines, the Hy-Vee race series that Greg Bennett and Hunter Kemper would always go head to head on. The biggest sport, the biggest distance in the U.S. was the Olympic distance, right? And Memphis in May had a huge pro field. Memphis in May was so popular. And again, it's Olympic distance. It actually used to be a Kona qualifier way back in the day. But what's happened is again, and this is society in general. So usually, sports and marketing and things like this, we mirror what society is telling us to do. But people want to spend is you go longer, you go bigger, you spend more. And that's where the market's gone, right? And it's like, how can we grow the sport by only focusing on the event that takes and that's the hardest to do, that takes the most to train for, and that is the most expensive. Right? It's not like triathlon is a global sport, in my opinion. It doesn't reach a ton of people, but it can, right? And it can by going back to the roots and remembering the goal is to grow, right? And create. And one of the things you and I first talked about when we ever started this podcast, like, do we want to do interviews? Not really. Would it be great for us to do interviews? Probably for that interview, but then people only listen to you for the person you're interviewing. Right. And we always kind of thought, we'd rather have a few couple hundred, because we're not the most popular podcast. We don't have billions of downloads. But what we wanted was, we didn't want to have we didn't want a single to go, platinum and only have people know us because of our single, right, or our interview. We wanted loyal fans who were bought into our message and want to be a part of this community, and that would be willing to travel, 2.5 hours for, a small show in an auditorium that only sat 400 people, right? Because they love the whole album. Yeah. And when you start small and that's your goal, you reach a lot of people, and you reach it in a genuine way. And I just think triathlon we've distanced ourselves from that. When you look at, most all podcasts are, interview pro athletes and interview scientists and interview, professionals. And like a person trying to get into sport is like, we need to provide more information that's educational, right? For everyone, not from what can we do to get you to here, but how can we get you just to get in to the sport? Like, if you don't know what triathlon is, here's a triathlon. But it also just is, as stewards and ambassadors of a sport, which is another thing that, always rip on is, ambassadors. And like, how are you growing the sport? Are you growing the sport, or are you just getting the discount? Right? It's do something, right? Have a purpose, right? Call a friend, tell them to go on a run with you, tell them to come watch, go volunteer at a sprint, go volunteer at a 5K, go to Olympic and watch and just cheer, right? And don't go with your Boston Marathon shirt on, and don't go with your Kona qualifying shirt on. Just go like a regular Joe, right? And be there to support other people and make yourself approachable, right? And I just think there's a huge gap in where we've ended up, right, as a sport, that it's more about the 10% than it is the growth of the sport that's going to keep us going for a long period of time, where there's more races to do and more opportunities, because more opportunities lead to more to more opportunities to better people's lives. And I think that's what triathlon can do for us.
So what you're saying is, I think what you're saying is that we're more like the Grateful Dead than like the Hughes Corporation.
100%.
That one-hit wonder. We're more of a grassroots podcast, kind of a, low-key jam band kind of podcast. We just kind of riff and go where we want. But yeah, man, I think I was kind of fortunate, I think, to get in when I did, because I feel like I might have caught the last of some of that energy you were just talking about, when it was still, like we talked the other day, you and I, about this idea of creating adventure, right? And now it just seems like sometimes it can feel like to me that, okay, I'm doing an Ironman. I'm going to spreadsheet it out and I'm going to go finish this report and hand it to my boss. It kind of gets a little sterile or something. But I remember back when I started, I started with a couch to 5K thing. And I literally hadn't run ever. I played sports, but never could run like a mile or whatever. And I remember how nervous I was just going to do that. But it was a group, and I just got lucky because thankfully a buddy kind of dragged me into it, and he hung around. And, that first, I remember posting a picture the night before my training started for a 5K. And I posted this big picture of pasta, and I was like, I'm carb loading. And I think that day we actually ran like 6 60-minute segments or something like that. And then, then it just kind of snowballed into this, I was doing the Rev 3 stuff back in the day with you. And I mean, that was cool stuff, man. And there was pros racing in those Olympics. And it was just kind of it felt like a bigger deal on some regard to me. Maybe it's just because I was new or whatever. And then, of course, at some point I made the decision to do Wisconsin, and they had, one of the driving forces for me to do that race was the mass start. I kept watching those videos, almost daily all year. I was scared it scared the shit out of me to think about, but I couldn't think of anything I wanted to do more. And it was like I was talking about that mountain bike race the other day, and they start and pretty much half the field crashes within the first mile because there's ice and snow. And there's just something about that was just drawing me to it, and it's not the big thing, but it's just the challenge and the adventure. And I know that I'm sure I get labeled like, oh yeah, old man, you want everything to be like it used to be and everything like that. And to a certain degree I do, because I want, it's just so disjointed. And you were talking a little bit about people on their phones earlier, and just this whole distractive nature of everything. I went to my old high school basketball high school game the other night, and against the biggest rivalry. My memory of that is just like off the chains, people hanging from the rafters, swearing and throwing shit at each other. And it was just like this incredibly intense rivalry. I walk in the other night and they're not even, half the bleachers aren't even pulled out, and people are laying back and their phones on, and like 3 people got thrown out of the game. There was nobody there for yelling at a ref. And I was just like, this is the weirdest experience, man. Like everything's got to be, there's 800 cops there with, secure, with those metal detector things, the whole 9 yards. And it's like, what is happening, man? Let's just go out and have fun. And I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, I really want to get serious about having fun again. I mean, that's sort of one of my new resolutions, actually, is or like goals or directions, I should say, because that, like it doesn't have to, work is hard, but work can be fun, but there can also be adventure and experience. And that's what sort of is intriguing me more than anything right now, because you take away, the event itself these days, but I've always been sort of enamored with like high energy and kind of tension and nerves and things like that. And I think that applies to everyone up and down the scale of your level of experience. And I really do love working with people who are just getting into the sport and kind of helping them get their way and find out ways to get better. And because it's sort of that different energy, it's kind of like it's a fresh, it's kind of that new beginning thing. But how do we recreate that? And I heard it all the time when, like I do my first 2 Ironmans, and people, that had done 20 or whatever, were kind of hanging around. They're just all chill and there's really something cool and stoic about that too. But there's something about like, how do you recreate that adventure, even in the same arena? And that's kind of where I'm trying to focus right now. I was like, man, I want that feeling again, and I think we always sort of chase that feeling.
Yeah, you're gonna have very much the same, goal, I think, for 2023. Fun and adventure, and I'll be the first to admit it. I'm one of those people I'm kind of a homebody, right? I'm like, I gotta be home by this time. Like, I really don't, But one of the things that with Hayden being like at this really cool age where he wants to go do things and experience things, it's like I kind of got to get out of my get out of my comfort zone shell and do a few more things because I know it impacts him. And I want him to be one of those people that, man, I don't want to go to a game. I want to watch it on TV. Right. I was like, no, it's just a different experience, and it's all about experience. Right. And I think we've gotten, and I think you and I have, we talk a ton on air and off the air, but how frustrating it's been to see how I think most people, even people that are genuinely and in their hearts are wonderful, caring, outgoing people, have just become dejected and frustrated and probably just quit the last few years of trying to help and trying to make a difference because no one wants to hear it.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone's in it for themselves. Right. And it's not about giving. It's about getting. What can I do for me? How can I protect myself? It's all about me. That's too risky. And it's like, do you know, like, I want to go back for a minute and go back to like the most impactful things you've ever seen, right, in sport. It's never been something that you've done, right? And you go back to the reason so many people got into the sport, and yourself included, right? You're at Ironman Louisville finish line. You see people coming down the runway or the red carpet. And it's not the people finishing in 9 hours.
Right.
Because that's just like next. You can't imagine, right? It's just too good, right? It's like that. I can't ever be that. But what you want is for someone to look like you, be like you, sound like you, to almost make yourself believe in you.
Yeah.
You see these people coming down the finish line, 15, 16, 17 hour. Everyone's there cheering them on. And that's, again, the Ironman sport didn't grow because of professionals. It grew because of the NBC podcast and the special interest stories. The people crawling to the finish line. The people who, had huge loss in their life, or they were, burned or handicapped, or had these, came back from cancer. That's what gets people fucking excited to do this, is the comeback story, right? And you can't have a comeback unless you have a fall. And think if we just continue to not have those people that really inspire us, right? That get out there and do their first. That's why I always love when I'm out running. I love seeing people, going, 14, 15, 16-minute miles. Because I'm like, right the fuck on. Yep. Get out there and get to work and do your thing, regardless, right? I can't do it until I'm in shape enough. I can't do it until I've lost enough weight. I can't do it until I've saved enough money. I can't do it until this. I'm like, you had a really impactful, it's like, a blog post back before Wisconsin, I think, it was basically, why not or why wait? Mm-hmm. And we do this so much in life is, why, I can do it again. Can you? Maybe another time. Can you? And then the other thing is, will you? Right? Will you actually, do it? Because we always, I think we've become so programmed the last 3 years to go through this checklist of all the things that are bad that can happen. Yeah, but what if I don't finish this race? What if I come in last? What if people make fun of me? My bike won't look the same, right? I don't want to go there and show up on my mountain bike. I don't have the right gear. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Right? So you don't do anything. Like going back to our podcast earlier this week, doing nothing gets you nothing. But doing something, even the smallest thing, can make the biggest impact, right? Because it's about experience. It's experiencing things. It's not about being afraid of everything. It's about experiencing something, right? Because we all have these experiences that, we never would have expected that resonated with us, that we'll never forget. That happened on a Wednesday or happened on some, random Sunday in the month of March. You don't know what's going to impact you. But the point of it is that you're never going to get impacted or make an impact by doing nothing. Right. By not sharing yourself. One of the biggest things that like I know I said before, that always irked me about, well, I get it, Alcoholics Anonymous and not talking about, yourself, and obviously never talking about anybody else in the program, was that, the how you limit how you talk about it. And I've always felt just kind of compelled to talk freely about my struggles and recovery and my journey and the things that I went through, because it provides hope to people. I mean, we've had multiple emails and text messages and even athletes I work with now that, have 30 years of sobriety or one day, right? And they only get that because I went through some shit and then I decided to share that I went through some shit and I'm still here kicking it. Right. And not because all you see on Instagram and social media and Strava and the news is, either horror stories or glamour stories. Right. You don't hear about the every guy person or every woman person in the middle just making it happen and making an impact, because it's not, it's not salacious enough. It's not glamorous enough, but getting out the door is, right. Sometimes that's the best that you got for today. And so if you're a person that's just like holding back and scared to make the move because you might not fit in, or the triathlon community in your neighborhood or your city is all about Ironman, there's a place for you. There's a place for you in the sport. There's a place for you to go out and run, and you shouldn't let what other people might think impact how you want to feel. Right? I've shared a story before. And I always joke with her because now she's like, it's like she's all healthy and fit. It's like my cousin Kelly back in the day. She was like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna go to the gym in a few months, and get start doing some spin classes." Like, why are you waiting? She's like, I want to get in shape before I go.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. A minute. You want to? I'm like, wait, what? You want to get in shape, right, before you go to the gym? Yeah. And it wasn't because of the gym. It was because she was nervous about what people think or look at her or say about her. And the truth of the matter is we don't do so many things because we're afraid of what people think. I use this analogy all the time. Is like you go out on the dance floor and you're worried people are staring at you, and then no one's staring at you, and you're like, why is no one looking at me?
Yeah,
right.
Like,
don't look at me, please look at me, right? Yeah. And the fact is, like, not many people care, but it's if you want to impact, right, not just yourself but other people, you've got to put yourself out there, and then you have to have the intent to impact other people, because we all get more, whether you want to believe it or not, whether you've experienced it or not. We all get more by giving more. That's how you impact it. And our sport has become more and more selfish and more centered and exclusive the last 5 or 6 years, when what it should be doing is kind of going back to the beginning. How can we invite? How can we widen our doors? How can we be more inclusive to get more people in, lower the barrier of entry? If you're going to invest, a ton of money in the professional triathlete organization by doing another seed round and raising millions and millions and millions and millions, maybe let's start a race series where you get a training plan and the race entry for $100 or something, to grow the sport, to get people to love it, because those people that love it, right? One of the first things I learned in business was this gym I was started managing, and the president said, listen, your best salespeople are your members.
Yeah.
It's not a random person in the street. It's not from guerrilla marketing. It's not from a billboard. It's not a commercial. Your best salespeople are your members. And that's triathlon, right? The best salespeople for the sport, right? The ambassadors of the quote unquote, the ambassadors of the sport are the people that are in it. And we have to do a better job and become more inclusive and to put ourselves out there, because you can impact someone and you won't even know it.
Very true, man. Yeah, you got to have, surrounded by people that inspire you or you feel comfortable with, and that's part of the journey. Like if you want to feel comfortable just getting back into training or working out, come down to Del Boca Vista, man. People down there don't care. They're all like in that phase, and it's like if you want to go out and dance and not be looked at weird, do it at a wedding and not, like a club on South Beach or something. You got to kind of get back into where you want to go and get that sort of encouragement. And you're right, man. I think, that's just such a weird thing. It's like, I remember, finishing my first Olympic, and then my first half. And it's sort of like, oh, okay, well, I've reached a new level or something like that. And I think we tend to like get in that mindset sometimes, especially when you start finishing Ironman and stuff like that. But I was, maybe I'm just lucky because I started so late and it's so fresh in my head, but I am always like, I remember, it's like I guess that's one of the things, right? Is don't forget where you came from. And I've said that, about everything. And I think some of the most successful people in the world, obviously, they remember that shit. I think, you always talk about people who are handed everything, aren't as grateful or whatever, or don't remember it. And I think that's how we do it. I think we're pretty good about, we do talk about 70.3 and Ironman a lot, but I think we get into, personal challenge stories and things like that. And I think that's important to remember that. Don't act like just because you finished an Ironman, you're some kind of expert, or something bigger than somebody just getting in the sport, because, frankly, within 2 years, they could be dusting you. And it's like, we have to encourage people. And it seems, I also remember how like almost unattainable even doing a sprint seemed to me back in the day. And like, it seems silly because, after everything you've been through, but I just totally remember thinking to myself, like, this is a big deal, man. I was nervous doing that first sprint that I ever did. And when I got to the finish line, it was like, it's kind of like, I don't know, I think it was what you're saying about your first finish, but I remember taking a picture at the finish line and my buddy seeing it, and he's like, man, I've never seen that big of a smile on your face. Cause I like over the last 5 years before that, it was all about going to work and slogging away and trying to be, some kind of hang out with the artists guys and not really being myself and not feeling my body and my connection to all that stuff. And then bam, that was the feeling. I remember that. It's like, wow, that felt really good. And we forget that so easily. And I think it's good to kind of remind yourself that it's like, it's a really difficult challenge to do and stick with stuff like this and find your way to the finish line. But there's something magical about that process. And if you can I think it just really helps to keep some form of, like I was saying, like an adventure or creating some kind of like, like finding joy in the challenge and the intimidation of it or something like that. And being like, man, I just got through that. And it's always little things. I mean, you can, that's the thing too, is like you see somebody doing Ironman, you don't see the work that went on beforehand. And they talk about that a lot. Like, some of these MMA fighters, these, that come up and they end up winning the stuff they go through to get there, like people forget that, but it is a process, and it's about keeping yourself engaged in that. And really, cause there's always little wins, right? When your first Ironman or first everything, every day you're kind of going out and setting a new PR and it kind of keeps you jazzed. And then what happens? And you kind of do it all. And then you kind of got to look for new ways to sort of keep the spark alive. And that's sort of where I go a lot, is like, what can I do? And that's why I think that's a lot of why I'm so consumed with not getting too wrapped up in, numbers and watches and all that kind of stuff, because I like the idea of going out for a run like last week, like in the freezing cold, and then, veering off into the snow and knowing that I'm working myself, but it's not going to show up as like, some kind of Strava event or something that looks good. But I like the idea of kind of just doing challenges mentally with myself. So I think that we can help everyone get engaged and get involved. I mean, because I know a ton of people that, could benefit from some kind of change in their lives, and to walk up to them as an Ironman versus just somebody that's like, hey man, I've been there. I understand where you're at. Let's just start here and you can get there.
Just start here. You said, and I think, we'll close it out here in a second, but, do something this year that scares you.
Yeah.
I mean, and do something that's out of your wheelhouse. Take on a race that won't be about time, because one of the biggest things I think has gotten in a lot of our ways the past few years is we don't do anything because it might scare us a little bit, but you don't think of the benefit of what'll happen once you do it. Well, I can't, that might not be safe. I might not be that good at it. Maybe I'll come in last. But I know I won't get a PR. Oh, I think that course is too tough. I can't do a sprint because I won't be fast enough, or I haven't done one in a while. Like all these things, right? We always find excuses to stay safe, right? So we just stay and do nothing.
Yeah.
And we don't grow. We don't push ourselves, right? No one ever gets, lays their head down at night and looks back and they're like, man, Today was boring. Went pretty much like I thought it would. Nothing really big happened. Nothing bad happened. Changed my life. Like no,
Yeah.
no one says that, right? It's always the hard shit, right? Or you had the perfect day and everything went your way and you're like, man, that's going to stick with me for a long time. Nope. You're like, whew, man, thank goodness the bad happened. But it's the stuff that challenges us where we're not sure we can do it. We're not sure that we'll be fast enough, that we'll be strong enough, that we can last long enough. That's the stuff that impacts us. And it's not the race. It's not the event. It's not the adventure. It's convincing yourself to do it in the first place. And not just to do 1 week of training for it, but to do all of them. And then to show up on race day and do it. Failure be damned, right? Failure be damned. Because all I got to do is get out there and try my best to do it. And the things you'll learn from that in the process, right? And the people you'll impact. Because that thing, like we never know who we impact. Someone looking at you and like, hey, if they can do it, I can do it. Look at them being courageous and getting out there and trying something that was so scary and then get up and going again, right? Yeah, our obsession with safety and selfishness is getting us nowhere. In fact, it's moving us backwards as a society. It's inhibiting it. It really is. I think it's just impacting us all in a negative way. And that's something we have to change course on now, not just as a society, but as a sport, right? Is to be inclusive and invite people in for these challenges and that, start small. It challenges every race. Everything you do, right, is hard. Right? It's not the distance. It's also the speed. There's so many different things you can do to be successful in endurance sports. And start looking at yourself as not just a triathlete, but an athlete, right? That does hard things, that does endurance sports, that you're an adventure junkie, or you just call yourself an experience junkie. I don't care what it is, but I'm addicted to good, awesome experiences that impact my life in a million different ways. Right?
Yeah.
Because then guess what? Then you've got 25 doors to walk in and out of, not just one. Right? I only do Ironman. I only do 7.3s. I only do sprints. I only do Olympics. I only do half marathons. That's it. Open yourself up. Right? Be a Swiss Army knife, not a butter knife. And be able to do more and look at doing more. And so if you're thinking about things to focus on this next year or to impact things, and not just impact yourself, right, but impact other people and impact a sport that you love, you got to look within, and then you got to look at what you can do to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to complain, have a solution, and then ask yourself, have I really been a person that's done my best, right, to move the sport along in a positive way, to do good things, to impact other people, to show up at the, beginners, meetings for the Tri Club, or to volunteer at a sprint, or to ask somebody how their training's doing, or ask them if they need any help. Do that, right? Be generous with your time and generous with your experiences, and it'll come back, tenfold. And that's, what, as we go into the new year, it's what we hope, we can do, and what we hope we have done the last, 6 years, is share our experiences, both the good, the bad, the ugly, and benefit you in a positive way. One of the biggest compliments we get, and I think one of my favorite compliments that we get that knows we're doing something right, is that people appreciate our vulnerability, that we're not perfect, right? That we're not the best, that we do struggle, right? But we also have successes, right? And that's important to share, because no one's perfect. Nothing is perfect, right? We're all flawed, which is beautiful, in my opinion. Like, how boring would life be if we always knew it was going to happen and everyone was perfect? No, thanks. I'll opt out right now.
Yep. Y'all have something to share, man. We all have something to share.
And it benefits everyone.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of, I think you and I are both introvert, extrovert types, and we kind of go back and forth. But it's sort of, for me, one of the biggest things is, you do have something to share, and people would like to hear it. And it's just about kind of clearing off that bridge that connects the two, the introvert and the extrovert, and just, trusting and being confident and just opening up. I think that's what makes me feel a little more alive too, rather than curling up and doing my own little workouts all the time.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I agree because I think we're both introverts, extroverts, but I'm an extrovert when I am in a giving spirit, right? Or that I want to give and help things, or we're at a camp and you're like, that's it, and that's a great way to be because you're helping people, right?
Yeah.
And it's selfless and not selfish. So we love you all. We appreciate you being listeners. We appreciate the impact you've had on us the last forever, as long as you've been a listener. The kind words, the participation in our community. For athletes to trust us in their coaching, but not just the coaching and the racing, but to be invited to impact our life in a positive way. And we hope we've done that. We look to do that even more so and with more people in this next year. We hope you all have an amazing new year. As always, you can go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike specifically, he's at CrushingIron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Happy New Year to you and your family.
Yeah, same to you. We'll catch you on the flip side.
On the flip side. All right, buddy. See ya.
See you, dude.